Well, we went from an 18-game point streak to a 2-game losing streak. We'll break down the Nashville Predators' latest loss to the Avalanche and some April Fool's Day fun on today's Locked On Predators podcast.
Your Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making the Locked On Predators podcast your first listen of the day. Every single day, we are your free daily Nashville Predators podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, we want to start out with a special shout out to our loyal Locked On Pred heads out there, the everydayers who tune into every single show. We love you guys and we appreciate the support you give us week in and week out. I'm Nick Morgan. I'm a writer from Penalty Box Radio, and I have a partner in crime.
You do. I'm Ann Kimmel. I am a writer at Penalty Box Radio.
First off, happy April, everybody.
How did that happen? We're in the last month of the regular season. What?
I don't know. It feels like last year went so slow. Like it was like perfect time. It seems like we crammed a lot in there. It just seems like the first 4 months of this year have just been a cocaine fueled like romp through space and time.
That is one way to describe it. Yes.
Yeah. Well, it is April 1st, which means it's April Fool's Day. And coming up on the show, Ann and I are going to play a little game of April Fools, where we'll discuss some Preds takes that have been out there after this 2-game losing streak and discuss whether that's April Fools, yeah, that's a joke kind of take, or whether they're actually maybe a little bit legit. We'll get to that coming up later in the show. But first, want to mention today's episode brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Also on today's show, it's a little bit of a rough go for the Nashville Predators after one of the best months of their life, 18 straight games with a point. The longest such point streak in Nashville Predators history. It, of course, ended with a bad loss to the Arizona Coyotes in Arizona. We talked about it before the show that day. Of course, it was going to be Arizona.
Of course, yeah.
It is always Arizona that ruins the Predators' fun. Nashville Predators then followed it up with what turned out to be another bad loss, this time to the Colorado Avalanche, despite the Nashville Predators having a big lead in that game. So, Ann, these are not just two big losses for the Nashville Predators when you look at the scoreboard, but they both came in similar fashion. Predators being the better team early, jumping out to a lead, dominating play early on, and then fading as the game went on. What's the deal?
Yeah, I think that's a legit question. I'm not super concerned that the Nashville Predators lost 2 in a row. It's the way, like you said, it's the way that they lost these 2 games that does sort of make you go, because, the Predators scored 4 goals in each of these 2 losses, which 4 goals in this league should be enough to get you a win. But they gave up a combined 15 goals. And when you give up a combined 15 goals in 2 games, friends, you are not going to win those games. And so I think it would be less concerning to me if the Predators had lost, say, 3-2, or if it had been like a 4-2 game with an empty net goal at the end by Colorado. But it's the way that the Predators lost, and it's this glaring, hey, we're giving up a whole bunch of goals that kind of has me feeling a little bit more uneasy than I think that I would have felt had they just been kind of regular losses. It doesn't feel great.
Yeah, you lose to Colorado 5-4. Even if you go up 4-2, I think you can kind of look at it and be like, yeah, okay. I mean, that's a tough team, but they completely sort of fell apart there in the second period. Although not entirely the fault of the team itself. There is a play in that game that resulted in Ryan McDonagh arguably, having his best season in years for the Nashville Predators right now, taken out of the game with a match penalty. My thoughts, Ann, that certainly didn't look like a match penalty to me. Ross Colton kind of looked like he was,
oh yeah,
putting it on a little bit thick there. I mean, it's a hit, and if you want to call like roughing or boarding or something like that, okay, but that's not the kind of play that gets you ejected from a game, right?
Yeah. And look, I'm all for the NHL being mindful of hits to the head. Like I get that. And I get that, you can't necessarily take intent into how you call this when you're trying to be extra careful about hits to the head. But when you hear the NHL folks say, we really haven't seen the science on hits to the head, you think, okay, y'all aren't really taking it that seriously, first of all. Second of all, when you call it, like when they initially called it like a 5-minute and then they were going to review it, I thought, you know what? I get it. You call the 5-minute, you review it. And if you look at that play, what baffles me about this call is that it does look like the contact came from the shoulder, but there was no like coming up and at him, there was no leaving the feet there. Ryan McDonagh was the player out of the two that was playing the puck. Ross Colton wasn't even looking at the puck, so the contact, I think just the idea that Ryan McDonagh initiated some illegal contact, I think is a little bit, it's a little bit of a stretch. So I don't have big feelings about this play. It feels very Tim Peel-ish.
Did they call it a hit to the head? Is that the reason they called it?
I don't, you know what? That's a great question.
Because
it's just listed as the match penalty.
It didn't look, I don't know, like the angle was so weird on it. Like if you slowed it down, it just kind of looked like a shoulder to, I mean, his head moved backwards. I know the Preds weren't happy about it.
No, Andrew Burnett was not happy.
Yeah, it was, I don't know exactly what the reason they gave for the match penalty was. It's one of those where like, I equate to like this. When it happened in real time,
yes,
I was like, "Ooh, Ryan McDonagh doesn't look good." You don't really, see him make a thing like that. When you slow it down, that's when it kind of gets a little bit more like, I'm not sure there was much there.
Right.
And to, I guess, bring home the point, like that was a big turning point in that game because Ryan McDonagh is one of the Predators' best defensive defensemen. And he's the guy that you want to go out there on the penalty kill. And Colorado had 3 power play goals in this game. He's the guy that you want going out there against, guys like Nathan MacKinnon, who had 4 points in this game. And Mikko Rantanen, another big game for him, 3 assists. He's the guy that would be matching up against those big stars. And now all of a sudden, you don't have one of your top 2 defensemen against a team like the Colorado Avalanche, who is absolutely on fire right now. I think playing like the best team in the NHL right now, and who, is a legitimate Stanley Cup threat because they won the Stanley Cup with this team 2 years ago. But that was such a big turning point in that game, not just because you lost somebody for those matchups, but just I think it sucked some of the air out of the momentum that the Preds had built early.
Yeah, I agree with you. It was definitely sort of a pivot point. And when it happened, I'm with you. I thought, okay, when they review this, I think they're going to adjust the call. I did not foresee them adjusting the call the way that they did, but losing Ryan McDonagh really changed the defense. And you have to remember, this is a defense that's already been through changes. That was Dante Fabro's first game back from injury. Jeremy Lazon has just returned from injury. Alexander Carrier is out. Spencer Stastny has just gotten 2 games under his belt from injury. Tyson Barrie, the veteran, not in the lineup. So you were really left with less of that veteran play that you want against a MacKinnon and against, the Colorado Avalanche. So I do think that had a huge impact, especially on the power play. And you end up, I think that Colorado ended up with 42 shots. And I think, you put Ryan McDonagh out there, I think that number comes down, whether he eliminates the opportunities or whether he blocks those shots.
Yeah.
Losing McDonagh, I think it really changed a lot about this game.
Yeah, I'm not saying the Predators hold on to win this game if McDonagh doesn't get ejected, because Lord knows what Colorado can do. They're such a good team.
Very true.
I'm just saying that, it certainly feel like that was the event that turned this game on their head. And, when that happened, and it was all Colorado after that.
Right.
And especially, you're talking about some of the situations in defense. Remember, Dante Fabro had just gotten back from injury. That was his first game. So, you lose one of your top defensemen, with other defensemen who aren't quite 100% yet. Yeah, that was going to be a tough ask for that Nashville Predators defense against that Colorado team. Yeah. So we talked about, the Nashville Predators now. Bad loss against Arizona, rough loss against the Colorado Avalanche. Next up, the Boston Bruins. What can the Nashville Predators do to stem the tide and get things back on track? Maybe start another 18-game winning streak here in the next little bit. We're going to talk about that coming up in just 1 second. But first, want to mention today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. The NHL season, it's finally almost over, folks. We are just a couple of weeks away from the start of the playoffs. And regardless of what happens with the Preds, whether they march into the playoffs on a high or just completely blow it all and miss, you can still win by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper. Sleeper is the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. It's our number one choice for daily fantasy sports, especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you have to do is pick whether studs like Philip Forsberg, Ryan O'Reilly, Roman Josi, and more will record more or less than their Sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus minus, and more in a given game. If you can nail 8 of those player picks, you win 100 times your bet on Sleeper. You heard me, Preds fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and availability. All right, Ann, let's talk about where this Nashville Predators team is right now. So we talked a little bit about the Colorado game. Of course, you recapped the Arizona Coyotes. Of course, that happened. Streak-breaking, spectacular crash and burn the other night. The other night in the desert. The Nashville Predators have to kind of get back on the horse pretty quick here because the Boston Bruins, who are one of the best teams in the East and in their own right, a team that is probably going to be in the Stanley Cup contender conversation.
Yeah.
They come to Bridgestone Arena in just a couple of days. So, Anne, what can the Nashville Predators do to get these back on track?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that they really need to address, and I'm certain that they're going to be on top of this. But I think one of the things that we've seen Nashville struggle with in these 2 losses that they have been executing really well through that consecutive point streak is something as simple as getting that first pass out of the defensive zone and really kind of kicking off the play. And Nashville has struggled a little bit to clear that D zone with that first pass. There have been turnovers in the Arizona game. Some of those turnovers led to goals. We saw a little bit of that in the Colorado game as well. And so for me, I really think you see in these 2 losses, Nashville, when they get the puck and they get it going in the offensive zone, they know how to score goals. They scored 4 in each of these losses, but it's getting the puck out of the defensive zone and through the neutral zone and kind of getting that first jump on the play. That's where Nashville has to clean some things up. Because again, once they get out of the defensive zone and into the O zone, they can score goals. They just are having some trouble doing it. And it feels just like a simple execution thing for me. So And I know part of that is, we talked about it in the first segment. Part of that is, this defense is kind of going through a thing. Like you've got players in and out. I think you've got a couple players that are in that are maybe not 100% yet. So I think that there's part of that, but I really do think if Nashville can get that first play out of the defensive zone, that first pass and really get moving up the ice, that is the thing that's going to get them back to their game that's led to so much success. They just haven't been doing that well.
Yeah, they're lacking sort of that speed. And, Nashville, obviously 15 giveaways against the Coyotes, that's certainly going to be an issue. I thought really did a good job of kind of playing possession, being very careful with the puck against Colorado, especially early, because that first period, they looked like one of the best teams in the NHL in that first period. It's the thing that stood out to me was just the speed and the assignments and stuff like that, where Nashville really wasn't doing anything wrong. It was just, they just couldn't sort of contain, the faster team. And that's something that was kind of unfamiliar to me when I look back on this 18-game point streak, because Nashville was going toe-to-toe with some of these fast lines. And I don't know if it's fatigue. I don't know if it's sort of the weight of carrying this 18-game point streak and just sort of, playing balls to the wall. And you had to play catch up against Vegas the other night.
True.
I don't know if it's just a lot of hockey and a lot of travel starting to catch up with them, but they did sort of look to me like, a little bit of like a slower team than what we've seen over these past few weeks. And, maybe a little bit more like the last year's Nashville Predators team.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I do think that they just look a little step slower, and that speed is really what's going to bring them success with this system. So I would agree with that. The other thing that I think Nashville has to address pretty quickly is special teams. Especially in the Colorado game, the power play is 0 for 6, baby. 0 for 6. That's half a dozen chances. And it wasn't even just that they didn't score. It's that they just didn't hardly even get set up. I mean, Colorado, and look, credit to Colorado, who are very good on special teams, but Nashville just couldn't even gain momentum. And if you are going to have a man advantage and not score, you at least have to convert that into a momentum advantage. Right. And they come out of those power plays, and Colorado had all the momentum because they had absolutely shut down the Nashville Predators. So I think the Predators have to get back to cleaning up some things when it comes to the power play. Obviously, penalty kills got to be better than 50%. I mean, 3 for 6 for Colorado. You're just not going to win games when you're giving up 3 power play goals. So I think addressing special teams, which will be interesting against Boston, who has some really excellent special teams players. I mean, you're trying to bounce back here against some of these really difficult teams. So it's a little bit tough to kind of get this out of the ditch for the Predators. But I do think special teams is going to be a big difference for them.
I am going to preface this by saying no way was all of their fault for the past 2 games. But UC Saros and Kevin Lankinen hit in the mouth a little bit these past 2 games. I assume it's going to be UC Saros starting tomorrow, but I'm also looking at how they respond as well. Like, is this sort of, is this kind of just a little bit of a rough streak for them? They're starting to, maybe they're feeling the fatigue a little bit this late in the season too. Or is this going to be like, okay, one bad game, let's shake it off and get back there? Because, each of them have been so solid. And, the Colorado game for Lankinen, the Arizona game for Saros, easily their respective worst games.
Yes.
Probably since January. So, I'm really interested to see how each of them shake off their next start.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it'll be interesting to see what adjustments the defense needs to make in front of them too. But I would say, and love both of those goaltenders, but they each in those 2 respective games, there are goals they want back. that you just were like, you know what, that's a save under some other circumstance. So I would agree with you. Not that it's their fault, but definitely not their best performances.
Yeah, I am interested to see what happens next. But Ann, it's April Fools. So number one, be prepared to see some crazy stuff on the internet today. Don't follow it. I don't think Philip Forsberg is getting arrested for manslaughter or anything like that.
Probably no.
We hope. But there are some other crazy hockey takes that you might see online. So we'll dive in to some of the takes that have been going online around Preds Reddit, Preds Facebook, and say whether those are just April Fool's joking posts or maybe if those takes have some validity to them. So we'll do that in just 1 second.
First, I want to let you know that this episode is brought to you by our great friends at FanDuel. The sports calendar is packed, my friends, and FanDuel is making it even more exciting to get in on all the action. Because right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That is $200 you can use to bet the tourney, Major League Baseball, NBA, of course, the NHL, and so much more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a big win. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook.
All right. It is April Fool's Day, and of
Heads
course,
up, y'all.
there's a lot of jokes flying around on Twitter nowadays whenever April Fool's happens. And pretty much all year round, there are some jokes coming around from Preds Facebook, let me tell you. So, Ann, let's look at some of the overreactions to these past two games or over the past week and say whether this is just April Fool's fodder, this take is a joke, or whether, maybe there's some validity or cause for concern there.
Yeah.
So, Ann, let's start with, I think, maybe the biggest takeaway from these past couple of games, which is these past two games show who the Nashville Predators really are. They're not that contender. All of, that 18-game point streak was just sort of a lucky team getting on a heater. And this 2-game points or this 2-game losing streak shows everybody the Nashville Predators are frauds. Is that a joke take, or is there some validity to that?
That is a joke take. And there's a couple reasons why I say that's a joke take. First of all, you don't get lucky in an 18-game point streak. There aren't 18 bad enough teams in the NHL to just luck your way into 18 consecutive points. Also, if you look at the way Nashville has won those points through that point streak, it comes from a variety of things. It's not just goaltending saving the day. It's not just the top line producing. It's not just Roman Josi carrying the team. That point streak came together from a number of different angles playing their best hockey. So for me, I think it's very unrealistic to say that the real team is this 2-game losing team. Now, it's tough to lose to Arizona. I think it's very tough for your bounce back game to be against Colorado. So I'm not as concerned. I mean, I don't like the way they lost these games, but I'm not as concerned about the Nashville Predators. And I'm certainly not concerned enough to say, you know what, these 2 games, this is the real team. So that's me. I think it's an April Fool's. What about you?
I think so. I think I would be more inclined to be like, I don't know about that. If it wasn't for the way the Nashville Predators played during that 18-game point streak, if they're winning games like, the way they won games at the end of last year, they're getting outshot 40-25, but they just kind of happen to quote unquote find a way.
Right.
UC Saros is standing on his head at every single game. That really wasn't the case. Like Nashville, they outshot teams in most games. They had the better expected goals.
Right.
They had the better Corsi percentage. They handled possession. They took care of the puck. Their special teams improved. That was kind of more along the lines of what a good team does to play sustainable hockey. And Nashville showed signs of being a sustainably pretty good hockey team, or at least a sustainably better hockey team than they've been over the past couple of years. So I'm not inclined to say, yeah, the Nashville Predators are about to have an epic tank.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
All right, what's your April Fool's take?
All right, so here's one with a more positive spin that I have seen in a number of different places, and I'm curious to get your take on it. The Predators will sneak up on Winnipeg and steal that third spot in the Western Conference.
This is a tough one because Winnipeg has not necessarily been playing the best hockey. They're 3-6-1 in their last 10. They've lost 2 straight. And I believe the Nashville Predators are now just 4 points behind them.
Right.
I'm also looking at the Jets schedule, and it's not the hardest schedule in the world over the next, month or so. So, to me, although I will say that there's Nashville on that schedule, so that's going to kind of be the Super Bowl.
That is high noon, baby. High noon.
Yeah. I'm going to say no.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that's an April Fool's joke take because I just think it's going to be a little bit tougher for Nashville to reach that threshold than, let's say, Winnipeg.
Yeah.
Because right now they've played the same number of games. They have, if I'm doing math right, 8 games left each.
Mm-hmm.
And Winnipeg has a 2-game advantage. So I see, I just see Winnipeg being more likely to be at least even with Nashville during the stretch run.
Yeah. I think it's going to be tricky. I will say it's possible, but I don't know that it's likely. It's possible. And the stretch that makes me think it's possible is where Winnipeg plays Nashville, then Dallas, then Colorado. And if Nashville can win that game against Winnipeg, that is huge. And then they would have to follow it up with Dallas and Colorado. And then the rest of their games, I don't think they're probably going to lose a ton of sleep over. But those 3, that 3-game chunk right there for Winnipeg, I think could swing it. But I don't know that it will. So, yeah.
Yeah. We talked about positive takes. So here's another one, Anne.
Mm-hmm.
Despite him missing a week with an injury, Jeremy Lazon will still break the hits record, the NHL hits record.
Let's go. This is not an April Fool's, my friends. Not an April Fool's. He has 346, I believe, 346 hits. He needs 386. So he needs 40 hits in the remaining 8 games. My friends, that's 5 hits a game. Jeremy Lazon eats 5 hits a game for breakfast, my friend. Yeah. Breakfast.
And he also had 11 the other game. So
yeah. So if he remains healthy, the only way this doesn't happen, friends, is if Jeremy Lazon misses, 2 or more games. I think this is legit. I think Jeremy Lazon is going to break the NHL hits record for a single season, and I think it's going to be incredible when it happens.
Yeah. Do you think there's like a Alex Ovechkin style celebration where all the Preds just come onto the ice afterwards
and like gang tackle him?
Yeah, like Jeremy Lazon just I don't know, takes out Nino Niederreiter with a hit or something like that. It's just 5 seconds after the play. Are they just gonna stop at 2-on-1 the other way, and then all the players come out and are celebrating on the boards?
That would be great. You know what's going to happen, though? What will happen is if this happens at home at Bridgestone Arena and they announce it, Bridgestone Arena is going to go nuts, y'all, because Lazon has been amazing. And it's not just the quantity of hits, it's just the wisdom with which he has used himself as a human weapon. He has not been careless about it. He's been very wise about it. His defense has been better. So I am 100%. Friends, buckle up. Jeremy Lazon is coming.
Yeah, they do play. It's going to be interesting. So one of the Preds' last games is against the New York Islanders, featuring Matt Martin, who has that record.
Ooh.
So is there going to be a pre-recorded Matt Martin message? Is he just going to skate on and pat him on the back or something like that and shake his hand before dropping the gloves or something.
I think it would be, there has to be some sort of moment for this, one
Yeah.
way or the other, because that's pretty incredible.
Yeah. Do we have one more?
Yeah, here's one that I have heard whispered about. And tell me if this is an April Fool's or if there's any legitimacy to this one.
Got it.
Roman Josi will be a Norris finalist.
I'm with that. I don't think that's April Fool's. I think that is actually something that is very plausible to happen now. I'm not saying he's going to win it in any means. Like, I think Quinn Hughes has kind of dominated that conversation since like the beginning of November. But I also don't think it's out of the question for Roman Josi to be one of the finalists. It's, the way he's been playing, I think has caught a lot of people's attention. I think his statistics are at a place where people are going to like look at defensemen and be like, oh, Roman Josi, look, the stats are there. Let's see what's in his game. And I think maybe the biggest thing of all, and the reason he lost that Norris Trophy to Cale Makar 2 years ago, is his defense is a lot better too. So I think if the Predators can get into the playoffs and, at least maybe hold on to that first wild card spot, and people are going to look at Roman Josi as a big reason why, I think it's very plausible that he's one of the 3 finalists at the end of the year for the Norris.
Yeah, I'm here for that too. Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. Well, on tomorrow's Locked On Predators podcast, Predators play the Boston Bruins.
So fun.
Let's see if the Predators can get back on track, snap that short losing streak that they have. So we will have a preview of that game coming in tomorrow. Ann, where can people find your work?
You can find my work online at Penalty Box Radio. You can find me on social media at ANK_Mama on Ice.
You can find me at Penalty Box Radio as well, or follow me on social media at _NS Morgan. That's going to do it for us on today's Locked On Predators podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Back tomorrow with an all-new episode. We'll see you then.